So, Martin. So, Martin, it's really good to see you again. And that the last time we talked, we were talking about nimittas and old meditation practices and things like that. And lo and behold, you go out and do it. And I'm impressed. So, show me that image again. Okay, so it's a white square with a black dot in the middle. In fact, it looks like the cover of a CD
uh,
sleeve.
it's not, but it could be, yes.
Okay, all right. So tell me about it.
It's not what I do the most, but when I start my practice, I found it's very good to settle the mind, and so I look at I look at it,
Mm-hmm.
and I close my eyes, and then I try to see it with the eyes mind, and I
Mm-hmm.
try to see it the more stable I can, because when I close my eyes, it's incredible. It's like there and there and there, and there I see other thing, and it's and after a while I can begin to see it more steadily, more stable.
So, how long do you do that? 5 minutes,
Uh,
10 minutes?
yes, more like 5 or 10 minutes, and then I go to the wholesome thought.
Okay. So, what kind of thoughts are you having while you're looking at this image?
uh, in fact, that's what it's good, because it's helped me to find how is my mind. Sometimes I try, I sit down and I say, okay, how is my mind? Is it scattered? Is it concentrated? Is it wholesome? Is it unwholesome? And sometimes, in fact, I don't know. I can't say how is my mind. But when I try that, I can say immediately, because if I'm tired or if I'm angry, it's like I saw that, and then I saw a face, I saw everything else. There is a lot of associations, um, and usually I cannot see it at first. It takes me like 3 or 4 minutes to begin to stabilize the image.
Mm-hmm. But what you're doing here is intentionally stabilizing the mind by actually focusing first on the image and then
Yes.
closing your eyes and continue to focus on the image, this time with the, let us call it the third eye for lack of imagination.
Okay.
um, and in fact, sorry about that, but that's what it actually is imagination.
Yes.
Right. So we image it in the mind. So we make an image of it. And that what you're doing here is you're practicing making a very clear image. And the one that you started with is actually quite easy. That in fact, some of the Zen people make it even easier than that by just giving the students a wall to stare at. They don't even have to hold it up, just a white wall. And so many of the students then wanted to go find the irregularities in the wall, which is part of the practice anyway. Can you see that the wall is not white? It's all kinds of things and white. So that's also part of the deeper practice with doing a nematized to do one that's more complicated. That in fact, in the Tibetan system, they often will use a tonka, which can be sometimes quite complex, or a mandala, which is also can be complex. That in fact, um, these guys that get good at the mandalas are the ones who can take their hands and just go like this with two hands like this, because they've got that mandala so focused in the mind that they don't have to reference or remember or any of that kind of stuff. That they've got it because they've been looking at that mandala for so much.
Dhammarato, I can see you.
You cannot see me. Okay, let me turn the video back off. and now back on.
Okay.
Okay, did that clear it up?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, all right, okay. So, um, yes, a motion image is also kind of different than a fixed or still image. Um, because we can actually, that's how the mind works anyway, that this whole thing about a still image is not real. Nowhere in nature does anything stay still, it just moves slowly. It's only when humans got paper and things like that, but even the paper itself will change slowly over time. It yellows over the years and things like this. Um, but the point is that we've got a steady image there, almost like a photograph. And that since we've had photography and photographs, I think that that subtly changed the mind in the humans in general to see things as fixed, as solid, like a photo, that in fact perfect. That, but the reality is only a photo can be perfect. A video can't be perfect because it's changing. And by its very nature of perfection, perfection is already the pinnacle. There's no place to go after perfection. And so the next thing you can do is to screw up your perfection. And so that we begin to see things in that lofty sense, or kind of a magical sense, as there is ultimates or there are perfections. And the Buddhist teaching is all, no, this is not. This is a movie, folks. This is not a photograph. That there's a show going on here, and it's got movement in it. It's got changing, and it's got cycles. That in fact music is built on cycles, and so are lyrics. And in fact, a poem, the meter of the poem and the rhyming of the poem are both cycles. We keep cycling back to the same sounds, and we keep cycling back to the same rhythms. Like 'twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. I won't go in there. You know, the stockings were hung by the chimney with care, and hoped that St. Nicholas would soon be there. Okay, so you can hear the various cycles in that. Oh, my underkerchief and I and my cap had just settled down for a long winter's nap. When out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from the bed to see what was the matter. I threw up the windows and tore up the sash. And the next thing I know, I busted my ass. And the moon on the breast of the new fallen snow gave luster of midday to objects below, when what to my wondering eyes should appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer. And I could go on with it, but anyway, you can see the cycles in both the rhyming and the cycle in the iambic pentameter. Okay, so that's very musical. But we see that in many things, that in fact, much of the music is dependent upon that cycling or that meter. For instance, Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, da 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 da, that's the whole symphony, or at least the whole first movement. Da 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 da. It just keeps on, but it's the same thing over and over again. And one of my favorites is that it starts off with a snare drum solo, and that snare drum solo continues to be the background for the whole piece. And Bolero takes about 20 minutes. It's a long, long piece of music, and it's got long passages in it for oboes and things that make it really hard. Okay, but it's got this beat: 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Except on the third and the fourth, we're going to do a triplet. Da 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 dum da 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 dum da 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 dum da 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 dum. That's the whole thing, over and over and over and over. Well, they have the melody, and this whole beat, da 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 da. So, music is actually humanity's understanding that everything is a cycle. And we begin to get into those cycles. Where the animals, they're caught in the cycles, but they don't even know it. But humans can recognize these cycles because we got that frontal cortex.
And
So we
the
can,
breathing is also like a cycle.
pardon?
The breathing is also like a cycle. Yeah, in breath, out breath.
In
Breath,
breath,
out breath.
everything is in a cycle. Everything is a sankara. Everything is a nature. And those two are related in the sense of nature means that it's moving along, 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 like that, anicca, anicca, anicca. But ultimately, it cycles. That it doesn't just go from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. Eventually, you get back to the beginning again.
But could it be really the beginning? Because things are always moving.
Well,
So you
you
could
could,
go back to the beginning.
well, except, okay, here's the way that works, though. It doesn't work in the individual, but it works in the big way, the big
Okay.
cycles, okay, like the cycle of birth and death. If we only had birth and birth and birth and birth and more birth, we'd be all over each other, not just all over each other as humans, but what about the worms and the mosquitoes and everything else? You have a whole form of mosquitoes and they don't die, but they birth and they have reproduction. I mean, the whole planet Earth would be covered, thick with mosquitoes, like 1 every 2 inches, in just a few generations if they didn't die out. That homeostasis, in fact, can come to a balance when the birthing and the deathing are in harmony with each other. And so this is what we mean by cycles. Everything is in cycle. You're born, you age, you grow old, you die. And then that cycle is repeated almost every moment.
Okay.
We go through that this is how we begin to understand it is because the thought that we just had just died. Let go of it. Okay. And then, in fact, the thought that we just had, which is step 13 and 14 of Anapanasati, it died. Cessation is step 15. Get over it is step 16. And that happens moment by moment. Every unwholesome thought can be killed off and put a wholesome one. New thought can be born. But that's not going to last. The old unwholesome thoughts are going to come right back in. The new thoughts, the wholesome thoughts are going to die, and the unwholesome thoughts come back. And seeing that cycle, we can say, hot dog, I'm back on the train again. I know what to do, and that is kick this guy off my train. Get that thought out. And now we're back into homeostasis again, but it doesn't last. In fact, this is what we're actually practicing with right noble effort, is to be able to extend that, to be able to sustain it, to be able to keep the wholesome thoughts rather than having to go through that cycle again of going back into the wholesome, getting lost in the wholesome, remember to wake up out of the wholesome, to see the unwholesome, and then to fix the unwholesome back to wholesome again. And we get into that cycle over and over and over again until we learn to get out of the cycle by learning to sustain the mind.
I found that using the image, wholesome image, it's more easy than wholesome thought. It's after a while I can just see a wholesome image and stay on it and be more and more precise, and it's less volatile than a wholesome thought. The mind is more steady. My mind is more steady on image than word.
Actually, for many people, in fact, you could say then that listening to our own thoughts is good for some people because they're more thought oriented. They think a lot. And then there are those who are visually oriented. And so actually taking an image to look at will help settle the mind down, but it'll also help us to see when the mind is jumping away from the image or when it starts talking again, right? Okay, so all of these things are good. The Buddha recommended the Anapanasati, and that's actually for, he said that this is one that's good for everybody, is the Anapanasati, in the sense that we have several different objects. We'll take the body as an object. We'll take the breath as an object. We'll take the actual eyes and what the eye sees. This is an object, and we can focus down on by using a nimitta. Okay. There's another one, and in fact, this is quite common, and yet the Westerners haven't gotten into it. It took me a long time. Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was not much into the chanting, and generally nobody at Wat Suan Mok was into the chanting. And so always the ones who were doing the chanting at Wat Suan Mok were generally monks from other places who were doing chanting where they came from. And so there was always, a small group of maybe 10 or 20 monks that were doing the chanting in the morning at 4 and in the evening at 6. And I attended them sometimes like that. But when I was in Greensboro, North Carolina, I happened to have been with an abbot, Mahasamsak, that I really, really adored. I trusted him. And we had a connection back to our teachers. Our Bhikkhu Buddhadasa and his teacher were connected together, really closely connected. And at the Wat that he was at, Wat Po, that's like the championship place to learn to become chanters in Thailand. This is the place. Okay, it's the number one. They've got 3 big things for this Wat Po, actually 4. One is that it's located on the Royal Palace grounds. It's that kind of Wat. Number 2, it's got the largest reclining Buddha in the world. Or maybe there's some of them that are outdoors that are exposed, but this is the longest one that's actually inside of a temple, inside of a Wat. The third item that they have on their list is that this is the place to go to learn Thai massage. The old style Thai massage is taught there. There's a school within the Wat. It's been doing that for probably centuries. But the fourth one is the big one, and that is the chanting. So on the grounds, the lying Buddha, the massage, and the chanting. And so I got into the chanting. I even wrote a book one time about the chanting. But what I could say now is that because of understanding it and getting into it, that it's a marvelous thing, just like the nimitta of looking at an image like you're doing, because it settles the mind. That in fact the monks will chant for about 20 minutes, and then they'll sit for 20 minutes because they're really ready to sit, because the mind is so focused on that chanting that there's hardly a thought left about the day.
Yes.
Okay. So I was asking you how long you were doing that image, and you were saying 5 or 10 minutes. Maybe you're not even sure. But spending your entire attention span, like about 20 minutes, there's something magical about 20 minutes in the sense that it seems to be connected to how the mind works, that they know about this. It's called attention span. That attention span lasts about 20 minutes, and some good teachers will actually break their hour of instruction up into 3 different groups.
I was teaching guitar, and that was what I was doing.
Mm-hmm. All right, so you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so at the most, then, you want to spend about 20 minutes at either the chanting or on the thing that focuses. And then we can get the mind to be really still very easily, very fast. But we could do that with Anapanasati. If you actually did Anapanasati for 20 minutes, your mind would be just like that.
Yeah.
If you're doing it correctly. So we've got various ways you can eat. What I'm actually saying is that there is a wide variety of objects of meditation that we can take.
Yes, because it's like different tool. Because if I am honest with you, sometimes the images are not good because I've got other image in my head, and those one by association, it's very hard to get rid of it. And I think you know what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, exactly,
I can
exactly.
see it good.
That image gets so burned in that it seems to either even affect your actual eyesight.
Yes,
And
yes.
yet but it's not burned into the eye, it's just burned into that inner eye.
Mm.
And so it does have that danger.
And that and the color are inverted because it's more light. You know, the white are more light. So when you
Hmm.
close the eyes, the white become black, and the black dot become white, and sometimes it drives me crazy.
Well, unless you're out in the woods someplace and you
Maybe.
don't have that envelope with you, you don't have your CD envelope. So why don't you just sit there and you, oh, there it is. Now I can see it with my eyes open. Wow, But no, you want to get rid of it
Yes.
rather than recognizing that you've itched, or you're actually able to change the neurons within the mind. And so,
Yes.
wow, look at that. We can actually make those kind of changes. But if you stop looking at your object, that image in the mind will fade away. But if you
Mm.
practice long enough, it'll stay there much longer. Okay.
And um, and sometimes I don't use the image. I just try to imagine a tree, for example, a wholesome tree, you know, with sunlight. And sometimes it's work very great to to bring peace. You know, some image are very peaceful, and I try. Sometimes I just throw the CD up, and I just focus on a wholesome image that I create in my mind, and then
Hmm.
I just let it go, and I just stay with what it is, what's there.
Well, here's something about that this is not necessarily meditation. This is human behavior and humanity. That many people throughout the centuries have developed various skills. Like a Rembrandt or a Picasso, or the skill is to be able to look at something and remember it, and then come over here and recreate it in a drawing.
Mm.
That's an enormous skill. Very few people have the ability to do that. Most of us, we look at an image, and when it goes away, it's gone. We don't have the ability to remember scenes very well. That in fact, budding artists, they need to have a model that sits there and sits there still like an old timey camera. Okay, to get a good image, the camera and the object has to be very still for a long time. But now with modern cameras, they're fast. We can catch that, and so can the mind be trained to where we can see an image and catch it fast.
Yes.
Actually, there's another example of that, and this is in the novel Oliver Twist. Do you
Okay.
know that? Okay. Oliver Twist is what was his
Also,
name? Okay, it was in the 1850s or whatever like that. So what happened with Oliver Twist is that he was from the countryside, a country bumpkin, and he had a little trouble getting along in the city until a group of ruffians or thieves sheltered him, took them back to their den, and found that they had an old thief master, one who was master thief, and he was training this whole herd of kids to be master thieves. Okay, and one of the things that he would have them do is to walk by a shop with all the stuff in the display. They had to just walk by the shop. That's all the time they had with it, and then they had to come back and describe every object in that shop.
yes.
Okay, that was part of that
Yeah.
novel. So most people can't do that. That in
No, no.
fact something will attract our eye. We'll look at that. Let us say that we've got a bowl of fruit, and most people will look at the banana, and that's all they see, and then they forget the rest of the fruit because they haven't taken the whole image in. Okay, the same thing back to the mandalas that the Buddhist monks in Tibet can do, or even the tankas. Normally, the tankas are more work of art in the sense of freestyle, to where the mandalas are actually fairly fixed. But the reality is that there is ways that we can train. You have no clue about how uh, vastly a human mind can be trained to be able to walk past a store. This is also the kind of mentality that's needed in card games, so that you can remember every card.
Yeah.
Okay, you know what's been played, you know what the rest of the deck is, etc., like that, because you're watching closely.
Yes.
Okay, the humans that have this ability to do that are often marginalized in our society. We call them autistic, is because they have the ability to really focus in on something. Some of them are, they call them savants,
Oh, yes.
okay? Because they can do things because they're paying attention. They're looking really closely at
Yeah.
stuff. And so we can actually then do that in the sense of looking closely at our own mind, to use these images to look inside the mind, to be able to create that image within the mind, or to be able to remember long passages. Like, that's one of the qualities of a concert pianist, the very, very best
Oh,
pianist in the world. They know the entire repertoire of the concertos, and they can play them because they keep practicing. Okay, they do that. That's what they're doing, and it builds those skills right into the fingers. Okay, here's the point though. What we're practicing is the skill of anapanasati, and the music that we learn to play is having a happy life,
yes.
so that we're joyful and we're satisfied, we're successful. In fact, feeling wealthy. I've got plenty of money. I don't have to worry about money for the rest of my life. Got too much money, right? And so this is the kind of attitude to have, is you've got it all. That way you overflow with joy. You overflow with happiness for others.
And okay, but so that's why I do only like 10 minutes of images, because
Hmm.
I find it's not it's like a technique to concentrate, but then you have to use that concentration to yes, to the
How about saying it, to bring everything together, to
okay.
bring the stuff together, and that what that focusing really helps with is removing the extraneous, unwholesome thoughts out of the mind. Because we're doing this with that nimitta and that image so much that we begin to stop looking at all of this stuff that's in the mind. And so we're actually able to do that. We can get rid of those hindrances. And so now changing to anapanasati is an enormous boon. You can just,
Ah, okay, it's like when you said you bring the horse to the pasture
mm-hmm,
and then to the corral, and then you put the saddle on. It's
right.
like
When
the
he's
pasture.
in, mm-hmm. So that's exactly what you're doing with that nimitta, is that you're taking the horse out of the wilderness and put him into just the pasture, in fact, just the corral of this one little image. And that's
Yeah,
where the mind is staying.
and
And so,
also it's very helpful because sometimes you can see the other image when the rest of the day I can see the mental thought more clearly, and I saw sometimes they're not they're not wholesome.
right, that's the benefit, though, that in fact I just had a student refer to that in the sense of, oh, well, I can get your pity and I can get your sukha and I can get all of this jhana stuff. But when I get out of it, I'm a grumpy old man, especially when my wife turns the radio on and I don't like it. Okay. Well, if you're developing sati enough to not have unwholesome thoughts while you're sitting there, why can't you remember to stop having unwholesome thoughts when wifey has the radio on? Why can't we have the sati to see the grumpiness arise? If we can get ourselves into a state of sukha, now we find ourselves in a state of agitation. Can we get ourselves back into a state of sukha by
Mhm.
remembering that we can do that without having to go back and sit down and watch a little dot here for 20 minutes and then do 20 minutes of anapanasati before we get our cool back again? No, the thing to do is to recognize that when the wife has the radio on and I get grumpy, I can see that grumpy. Say, nope, I'm
Yeah.
not going to get grumpy this time.
Yes. And um, by the way, something I do too is with the sound. I put a bell and then I try to remember all the bell sound,
Mm-hmm.
and I find very helpful because in fact I have, tinnitus.
Do I know what?
Tinnitus. The ringing in the ear.
Oh, yes, yes. Tetris, something like that. You're right. The
Yeah.
ringing in the ears that some people
And
can hear. Everybody can hear it if they pay attention to it. When you're in a
yeah,
really quiet place, you can still hear that ringing in the ears.
and for years I was very very I have aversion for that because I'm a composer and I was
Hmm.
very suffering from that tinnitus. But now I find it's marvelous because sometimes I can hear it uh, along the day. I can hear it, and it helped me to with the
Okay.
sati.
Here's a question then for you. What note are you playing in your ears? Do you know which note it is? Is it a high A?
Um, I think it's like a C sharp, C6 sharp.
A C sharp. All right.
Because
I know that note because I played
it's
stuff
like
like waltz in C sharp minor, and
like
so I. Mm-hmm. Okay, mine's in the A, and I think that's because of tuning. That I
yeah,
could
maybe.
still hear that orchestra. I know that note. I've got that note wired in my head, almost like the way that you have that black dot that turns white. Okay, but the technus itself is a higher frequency. It's like an octave or two above that. It's a
Yes.
very high A, not the 440. It's probably eight, maybe 1600, a couple octaves above. So, yeah, I've been playing with this kind of stuff for years. This is great
Yeah,
toys to play with.
and
And
it's
we
work.
can take them as object of meditation, which is a whole lot better than to have unwholesome thoughts. So actually just listening to the music, they call it, by the way, the music of the spheres.
Sorry.
Yeah, they call it the music of the spheres. Okay. There
Okay.
is actually a piece of music by that name. And each one of them, like, has a Jupiter and it has a Mars and March and all of that kind of stuff. But the original context of the music of the spheres is that sound that you can hear when there
Okay.
is no sound at all, which is this tetanus that we're talking about that they call. But that's way
Oh,
too
okay.
scientific. The music of the spheres is very ancient, very poetic.
Is it from Gustav Holst?
I think so. Yes, you got it.
Okay. Okay. It's great.
Uh-huh. So anyway, that's worthy of an object of meditation. That the place
Okay.
to do that is to get away from literally everything you got to get away from. I mean, it's easy enough to close the eyes, but
Yeah.
meditation halls are not good places to practice this. You really need to be in a quiet space. Caves are favorites for it because there's nothing in a cave that's happening,
Yes.
especially with the mud walls just sapping up everything. Another place that you can hear it actually is out in the outdoors in a heavy snow, that for some reason during the snow, either the falling or the newly planted snow just absorbs all of the sound and
Oh,
it gets really quiet. And then you can hear that inner ringing in the ears because there's nothing else to crowd it out. Okay, so
In
those
fact,
are the kind. Go ahead.
oh, sorry, I was saying that in fact, even sometime when there's loud circulation or loud noise, I can still hear it, and
Mhm.
it's like the breathing. You know, it's a sati point. I use it to remember that I can feel the way I want to feel, and
Mhm.
so it's become a relief, like an old friend. You know.
Yes, exactly. That's how we want to look at this stuff, is to be, oh, there you are. Yes, my old friend. Even, aha, I see you, Myra, as if it's just an old friend. Even our most negative thoughts, we can be friends with.
Yes.
We can invite them out happily. That I don't have to go there. But we also come to understand that we're constantly changing, that we're
Yeah.
not fixed. And so things come and go. Things are in cycles. Basically, what we could say is that everybody has the personality view that they are fixed someplace on some circle, and they really don't like it when they find themselves on another place of the circle because they think that they belong over there because it used to be there. But then it went around. And instead of enjoying the round and round and rounds because we can see that, we get unhappy because it's on a certain part of the cycle. But everything's part of some bigger cycle.
Okay.
And
Oh, sorry, Gori.
pardon?
No, sorry.